Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram and TikTok at Tokyo Station Pens, and on Twitter at Tokyo Station MNH.
And my name is Jacob. I am Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter, and have a blog at foodafan.com.
And this is episode 57. How are you doing, Jacob?
Gogatsubyo.
Yeah, so I just got back to work as well, and a lot of my colleagues are like, oh yeah, how's your holiday, blah blah blah, and I started telling them, I said, well, in Japan there's this disease, right? This is sickness that goes around, and it happens at the beginning of every May, actually second week of May to be precise.
Exactly the day after Golden Week, yeah.
Exactly, because we've all gone on holiday for a week, and now we're really, really ill because we don't want to go back to work.
and
that's
and I think this year, I think someone said it's 70 days until the next holiday. It's longer than usual, and so people have been tweeting out of despair here in Japan.
Well, it's in July. It's July 18th, I think.
Yeah, Gogatsubyo has been trending on Twitter. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I think we've got one July 18th, and then that's only one day, right? And then the next one is Silver Week in September.
Which I think is also shorter than usual or more spread out than usual this year.
Well, it's the Monday and the Friday, so we have to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay, that's not actually too bad. In fact, that's probably preferred over someone. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's not terrible, but if it was Friday and Monday rather than Monday and Friday, that would have been nice.
That's true.
Yeah. How's your pen life been? Because we've not got a ton of news on today's episode because I feel like it's been a little quiet just overall in the Japanese pen scene.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't bought much recently. I've been a bit disappointed as that we talk about our line or whatever about the lack of new releases from Pen BBS and Moonman in particular, because I think those, for all the criticism, I think those are two of the brands that do most interesting stuff nowadays, and I would love to see a follow-up to the T1. I would love to see another crazy filling system from Pen BBS, but I understand that the lockdowns and supply chain worries makes it difficult for everyone, especially the Chinese manufacturers.
Yeah, I've been meaning to buy some more of those carved nibs from Pen BBS, but I didn't even bother asking because I know they've been having a hard time. It just seems insensitive to be like, oh hey, can I get some of your carved nibs? When are you going to have them out again? When they're obviously struggling with very basic humanitarian things such as breathing fresh air.
I think Bane closed or temporarily shut down the eBay store. Removed all the listings and said that we'll come back later once the lockdown is over.
Yeah, that does make sense, but who knows when that's going to happen. I actually have a friend who lived in France for the past, I think, almost 5 years, but she's Japanese. So she got hired by this company, I guess in China, and so she came back to Japan for a few months, enjoyed Japan, and then was about to fly out to China, to Shanghai, for her new job. I think she flew into China. She flew into Shanghai like 3 days before the or maybe a week before the lockdown started.
Oh no!
But you have to quarantine in China when you arrive.
Sure.
So I think she quarantined for 10 days, and then the lockdown started. So she hasn't seen sunlight in 2 months now. And yeah, I do feel really bad for them. I understand where they're coming from. I understand why they want to have COVID zero. But I also think that at this point, you can pursue COVID zero if you decide to not have outside contact ever again.
Right. Although even North Korea is now getting a lot of COVID cases, so I'm not even sure if it's so.
Yeah, and I mean, just think about it, right? Like, if other countries aren't pursuing COVID
Yeah.
zero, um, eventually, right? You're gonna have people with COVID. You're gonna interact with people with COVID,
Yeah.
or maybe not in China, but Chinese people outside of China,
Mm.
and they'll go back, and then there'll be COVID again. So I think, yeah, it is really almost about the management, and I think since we've had the vaccines
Mm.
and boosters, uh, I feel like it's much more about like the management of it,
Yeah, in
and it's
Japan, the rule now seems to be that the pressure on the hospitals, how busy the hospitals are. There's a certain threshold value. If it goes above that threshold, then they go back to a state of emergency or take other measures. But
right,
as long as under that threshold, then it's more or less business as usual.
right, and I do feel really bad for Bainey and all those folks out there, because this is like 2 months where they don't make business, right?
Yeah, that must be terrible.
And Bainey is I don't think she works for a company anymore.
But she wasn't kind of
I
like
think,
fashion influencer or something like that, right? I don't really know, but that's the
yeah,
impression I got from her feed.
I think she was like a perfume
Mm,
influencer, or she worked with brands to promote perfumes. But you know, can't go out to the store to buy perfume now, right?
right.
So, I mean, it's even difficult to have shipping, right, in China right now, because it's so strict. Like, people literally can't do anything
Mm.
unless you're a COVID tester.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. Shipping is
Yeah,
difficult everywhere now, but yeah, it seems to be particularly difficult in China right now.
yeah. But on the other hand, on the flip side of the COVID news, Japan is starting to think about relaxing their restrictions on inbound inbound tourists. And when I say tourists, I don't mean just business travelers, who those have been allowed for about a month or two
Yeah,
now. But folks with tourist visas, so they're thinking of starting to issue tourist visas, and usually these these so-called leaks are really controlled by the government. So usually what this means is that they've made the decision to relax the rules, first for tour groups and then for individual tourists. So they've made the decision. They've told the media they've made the decision, or they've quote unquote leaked to the media that they've made the decision, and then now we're gonna see if it fully happens. That they probably want to measure public sentiment, and then officially announce it probably in a week or two, right?
yeah, but the caveat here is that it could definitely change. And if you remember, like late last year, I think it was like in October, they're gonna ease up a lot of the restrictions, and then like 1 month later, there was no complete shutdown again. It's hard to predict what's going to happen because it's obviously a function of any new mutations and whatever. So this assumes nothing bad happens really.
Yeah, I mean, it assumes the current trajectory,
Yeah.
I would suppose. But obviously, if we have spike of cases again, that wouldn't be the case. But I think, yeah, it's definitely something hopeful.
Yeah.
And what this means is that hopefully we're gonna get some tourists, some inbound tourists, for tips.
Yeah, I mean the whole tourism industry in Japan has been asking for that, and of course a lot of the retailers and others have been hoping for tourists to come back. I mean the retail stores we go to, they always mention that some of the products that they expected to sell out in like days have been around for months, if not years, because the usual tourists did not come. So yeah, good news for the pen industry.
And even when you go to Maruzen, it's actually pretty funny. But there is a way to tell if the Maruzen annual inks, whether it's the original release or the re-release, right?
Yeah.
And the way that you tell this is by the shape of the sticker. If it's in the diamond shape, then that's the original.
Mm.
And then if it's a rectangular shape, then that's a re-release. Yeah. You still have the original release of the Hayashi rice, and not just a couple of bottles, right? Like rows and rows of the original release of the Hayashi rice ink.
I'm not sure if you can just blame the pandemic for that.
No, because the color is not that great. I agree, but still, like, there's quite a few more than what I would have normally expected. And I think they even still have original bottles of other inks too.
Yeah, they still have the Aurora, the light blue one from this spring, and then they have some of the reruns. I think, like usually the purple one is not very popular. The light brown, which I really like, the Fukuro one, if for some reason not popular, they usually have that one. And then that marine blue, which they do reruns of every once in a while, is still available, I think.
Yeah. So there's that. But I think one of the biggest challenges, and I've been suffering this as well, is that flight tickets are just through the roof. I was talking to one of my friends on Instagram, talking about coming out to Tips, and he said that, flying over, albeit he likes to fly business class, but flying business over is $8,000, Jacob.
That's pretty expensive.
And that's pretty wild. That is pretty wild. And I will be. I don't think I've announced this on the podcast yet, but I will be going to the DC and SF Pen shows this year. Also to see my family as well. So I'll be there for about a month. And let me tell you, tickets are crazy. The cheapest tickets that I could find were about $2,000. And, I'm bringing two people, so that's like 4,000, right? So it's just wild, Jacob. The flight situation is wild. So probably this year we'll have more Asian visitors rather than visitors out from the US, but that's still better than nothing.
But on the positive side, if people come here from the US and go to the pen shows, because the yen is so ridiculously cheap right now, they're gonna have a lot of fun. They're gonna be able to buy a lot of stuff for their dollars.
That's true, but assuming that it stays until early November, right?
Yeah, but there are some very powerful forces that are pushing the yen in that direction. It's hard. It's hard to reverse it.
Yeah. So, anyways, we'll definitely see about that, and we'll see about whether people are able to come back into Japan. I sincerely hope so. I sincerely hope that folks will be able to come back into the country, and we'll be able to have some semblance of more, I guess, quote unquote, normal life. But until then, it is going to be just us going around to different pen shops. And speaking of that, I did exactly just that, because you remember last time we talked, I was actually in Kurashiki. And so we stayed the night there. We went out back to Aun the next day, and then we went to Osaka for a few days. I think this is actually quite interesting. Most of industry is in Tokyo, right? Like, a lot of businesses are headquartered in Tokyo. I know whenever in one of my previous companies, we had Osaka customers, and they would always complain, "Oh, you don't do any activities in Osaka. You don't come here for customer events, blah 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 blah." So one thing that I did find quite interesting is that actually there seems to be almost even more pen shops in the Kansai region versus Tokyo. Have you noticed that?
To be honest, I haven't been much to the Kansai region, and probably not even since my Sendai days when I was traveling as a student. But obviously I know of the big stores. I don't know as many stores as I know of Tokyo stores, only because I've been here much longer.
I think Tokyo has more like the department stores, whereas Kansai has like the more regional stores, which I think that's probably why I find it more interesting. But just to rattle off some names, you have Pen and Message. In Kobe alone, you have 3 different Nagasawas, and they're absolutely massive. And then you have a Nagasawa in Osaka, you have Pelapenna, you have Morita, you have Kaku. All these smaller regional stores. Whereas if I think of Tokyo, you have the big stores here, right? Maruzen and Itoya, yes, of course. But then when you think of the smaller stores, maybe it's Stars, it's Shosaikan, Bunga Box, and that's almost pretty much it, isn't it? Oh, there's Asahi as well, but otherwise there's not that many.
Yeah, it depends on where you draw the line. If you include things like Eurobox and Pen Cluster, and that thing in that shop in Ueno,
Right,
that has Shizuka inks and so on. So it's sort of, at some point you need to say these qualify as stationery stores.
right, yeah. I think Toma would probably qualify, but like the Ueno Bunguten, or not Ueno Bunguten, one of the, it's Okayama Bunguten, which is not Okayama in Toranomo, right. It's Okayama in Ueno. I think that probably wouldn't count. It's probably more of like an office supply store. But while I was there, I did find some interesting things, some things that I didn't know about, and I visited 3 different Nagasawa stores while I was there. I visited Umeda, I visited Penden, which is in Sannomiya. That's the main shopping area in Kobe. And then I went out to the Kobe Akarenga area, the red brick warehouse area, and they had one there. And it was very interesting to see how different each of these were. So I would say Umeda and Penden are definitely the places that, if you're specifically a fountain pen person, would want to go. Umeda especially, they even have their own separate Instagram channel, but they have a lot of exclusive. They have the full lineup of inks, and they had a lot of Nakayas actually too. This store, I found something quite interesting, which I shared with you as well. I found a scented sailor ink. They had this ink which they called it was a sumi ink, which isn't actually real sumi. It is still, I believe it is still dye-based ink, but it's scented to smell like the Japanese Chinese calligraphy ink.
So it's basically the same concept as those Mita Kuretake inks, but it's not actually made by Kuretake.
That's right. And I was quite surprised. It's called Bokko. And I was surprised because I had actually never heard of this ink, even though I had the Mita Kuretake ones already. I'd never really heard of this ink. And you found the link to it on Nagasawa's website, and you shared it with me. Let me just share some highlights from this. So, this Bokko was the first. Does it say? Nagasawa Bungu Senta として発売した初めてのオリジナルインクです。So this is, if I'm reading this correct, this is the first original ink from Nagasawa Bungu Center. That can't be right.
That doesn't mean Nagasawa as a whole. It just means
that shop, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird with them, but let me tell you, this smells just like sumi ink. This smells very strongly. I'd say it smells just as strongly as the Mita Club ones. And interestingly, the Mita Club ones are somewhat waterproof. So I wrote a few lines on some Tomoe River, and then I ran the faucet over them. This ink is fairly waterproof, I would say.
Nice.
Did you see the photo that I sent you afterwards?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me right now, but yeah, I remember you sent that. And I think this is interesting because we have talked before about how while Sailor makes a lot of different ink for a lot of different retailers, they tend to be a bit conservative in the sense that they don't do much in a way of pigmented or iron gall or other interesting things like that. But here we have a scented ink from Sailor. Is that the first one we know of?
That's the first one that I know of. And it seems like it's been around for quite a few years. Since 2018, actually. So I was actually surprised that I didn't know about this ink.
But it's a black ink though. Our community, we don't usually pay too much attention to the black inks, I think.
That is true. And I don't think they bring this ink over to the pen shows as much, probably because it's not as strong of a seller. But I did buy one. I think it's fun. Yeah. So afterwards I went to Pen Den, and Pen Den has more vintage pens, and I really do have to pause here and say that the vintage selection at Pen Den, and they have some at Umeda as well, it's quite impressive for a retail store that's not specialized in, secondhand or vintage. But my goodness, the prices are rubbish. Like, they're probably like 50 to 80% overpriced, based on the price tags that I saw. But it was insane. So these two probably, if you want to, really focus on fountain pens, these two are the ones to go. I would say the Akarenga one is not really worth it unless you're into the general stationery as well. So like stickers, notebooks, and all that stuff. There they have a lot of selection for that, and I did feel like it was more of a tourist oriented store. Although it's a bit out there.
But when you talk about vintage pens, I mean, if you talk about the stores in Tokyo, you have, for example, Eurobox and Pen Cluster. And Eurobox, I would say, because and to some extent it's also true with Kingdom Note, but they have pens in all different conditions and ranging from somewhat boring standard editions to more exotic ones. And because of that, the prices are all over the place. While Pen Clusters seem to focus on some like really exotic pens that are like restored in pristine conditions with like size 5 Kubo nibs or whatever, so the prices are consistently high. So would it be correct to say that Pen Den is more sort of in the Pen Cluster end of that spectrum?
Well, that's interesting because Pen Cluster has a lot of really cool stuff. I was there actually last week, and I'll be there again today. But yeah, as you rightly say, they're very high end. I saw a Mont Blanc that cost $9,000 last time. Really cool thing, but not something that I can afford. Eurobox has more varied condition, but Fujisan is a very well known restorer of pens. And usually everything there is in working condition, and he'll fix you up, right? If it doesn't work, he'll fix you up.
But I would say that the prices at Eurobox is often comparable to what you find at Wagner, for example. So you know that the pens are going to work, but you can find things like relatively boring things like a Pilot Custom 67 for a reasonable price. Right. While I don't think you go to Pen Clusters to buy a Custom 67. No,
and Eurobox's prices are I think actually quite fair for the stuff that they have. Pen Den was selling a pen with a cracked ink window for about double of what I would pay a pristine version of that pen.
Oh wow, okay, that's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. Yeah. So definitely some of the worst prices on vintage I've ever seen. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking out the stores if you're there. Nagasawa is very, very cool. We skipped Pelopena and Giftionary Delta and Morita this time. But yeah, definitely a lot of smaller retailers out there. And I believe in Kyoto there's also Kyoto Maruzen, which surprisingly I've never been to, even though I've been to Kyoto so many times.
Yeah, and I recently learned that Kyoto Maruzen has its own Kyoto limited pen.
That's right.
I'm not sure if they still have it, but they did that in the past.
Actually, there's a Kyoto lemon and a Nihonbashi lemon. So hopefully I'll be able to go out there when I go to the Naniwa pen show, which is in June.
Oh, you're going there back for the pen show?
So I asked Alessa of Inky Rocks whether she wants to come with me, and I think I've convinced her, Jacob.
You guys have too much free time.
No, I don't think so. It's like a day trip, you know. You go out there, it's like going to Yokohama.
No, Yokohama is just like 1 hour away. It's different.
You know, it's like 2 hours away. It's okay. But anyways, I think it'll be fun, and it'll be a lot of fun to talk about it on the podcast when we come back. Yeah.
Yes, I didn't go quite as far as you did over Golden Week. But you had Monday and Friday off as well.
No, I actually just took I had Friday off. Yeah, Friday and Monday off.
Okay, yeah, that's different. Yeah, a lot of people did that. It was actually quite nice to work on Monday and Friday because there was basically no one in the office. And
Right.
on Monday, on top of that, Hong Kong was off as well. So it was so quiet, so peaceful. But yeah, I only went to Yokohama actually with my son, and he always wants to go to Yokohama. He's more interested in how to get there than the destination. He wants to take that S train to Yokohama, so we had to take the S train to Yokohama. But what struck me about Yokohama, and maybe it was the same thing in Kansai, it was absolutely packed. I mean, pre-pandemic, these tourist destinations were always packed during Golden Week, but it hasn't been the case for the last 2 years. I would say not to the same extent. But when we came to Yokohama and we went to the Chinatown, it was like it was all like one giant cube, like a big jelly.
Yeah.
And I took photos and I posted it on my stories, and people asked, is this still a pandemic over there? Is this okay? And but predictably the COVID numbers have gone up since Golden Week, so yeah, it wasn't without problems. But just a quick thing about Yokohama. So as usual, I went to the Itoya in Yokohama, which is probably my favorite Itoya and one of my favorite overall pen stores, because it's more quiet and less crowded than the big one in Ginza, and it's very stylish, elegant, and they got this Romeo cocktail ink bar. So I went there and ordered some cocktail inks again, and just like last time, I always try to find out who makes these cocktail inks, and I don't ask directly, but I asked once again, different person this time, but I asked, are these sailor inks? And he said no, and he even went so far as to say that the maker is a Himitsu.
That's so strange. But yeah, I don't know, like, I feel like it's, yeah, that's just strange to me. That's wild.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but yeah, they really don't want to tell the customers where ink's coming from.
Yeah, it's not like I'm gonna go there and get them to produce like a line of inks for me, right?
Right.
Maybe I am, but
that sounds like a possibility.
Yeah, but yeah, that's wild. I need to get down there.
Yeah,
I need to get
you
down
definitely should. Was Kobe just as crowded during Golden Week?
there. Well, I went to Universal Studio.
Okay, well that's you're asking for it.
Yeah, I went to Universal Studio. By the way, side note, the Mario Land, fantastically done. We also did the Detective Conan event, which was very fun. The rest of Universal Studios for me was a little bit underwhelming. But yeah, those two definitely highlights. Anyways, so yeah, it was okay crowded. The trains were actually full. So yeah, there are still a lot of people in Japan. They've just come out now because no foreigners.
Something.
Actually, a lot of foreigners in Kurashiki. A lot of Thai, Vietnamese folks out in Kurashiki. But yeah. So I want to dedicate a little bit of time talking about this Noodlers thing that's blown up all over Reddit, all over social media now. I don't think you've heard anything about this, right, Jacob?
So like 2-3 days ago, a friend of ours sent me a link and asked me, what's going on with Noodlers, and the link was to Gule Pen's post. And so I went to Gule Pen's post, and I really didn't understand what was going on. And the text was context, go to Noodler Inc. I went to Noodler Inc. and I saw an apology. I still didn't quite understand what really happened. So whether or not this is justified, I was a bit disappointed in how Gule Pen's handled it, because to me, just on the surface of it, just looking at those two posts, it looks like they are just like throwing a long-time business partner under the bus and almost humiliating them in public, and they didn't really do a good job explaining why they took such a drastic action.
And this is actually exactly why I want to talk about this issue, because this is quite a serious issue. So for many years now, right, we've known that the guy behind Noodlers is a very political person, which there's nothing wrong with being a very political person. I'm a very political person as well. But he's a very political person. And he's been putting a lot of his politics on the ink labels. So we even saw that in 2019, Noodler's ink became very popular in Hong Kong and Taiwan because they have a ink called Tiananmen, which has an image of Tank Man. So the Noodler's owner, Nathan Tardif, has a few more problematic stances, I would say. So he is very heavy into individual freedoms and stuff like that, which is fine. But he put out several very problematic inks, especially in the past few years. Inks such as there's an ink called Rhino, which is in protest of mask mandates. So he's kind of like an anti-masker. And the specific labels in this apology refer to two inks where he decided to put horns on these Jewish Federal Reserve leaders.
Right.
Now, I grew up in Hong Kong. Hong Kong does not have a large Jewish population. Apparently, horns on Jewish people have been a long-time trope. And as I've been reading, a lot of Jewish people apparently have been asked, hey, where are your horns? Which is, that's dehumanizing. I don't think it's the right thing to do. It's, antisemitic. And, when I was talking to Akane about it, she said, I didn't know about this trope, but I don't think it's a nice thing to put horns on people anyways, right? Which is kind of where I stand as well.
But his previous labels, I mean, I know he has strong opinions about like monetary and fiscal policy, and he has ink names and labels that reflect that. And I think those labels have also been maybe in different ways, but been a bit offensive, right?
Yeah, and then he's got like Dragon's napalm, which obviously napalm was a horrific weapon used in the Vietnam War. So the specific labels in question are these specifically anti-Semitic labels. And Bernanke Red was actually released a few years ago, and Volkler Green is the one that came out around January, February, right? So the timeline on the surface, was that people complained about these inks when they were released, and then it was kind of like yeah, whatever. So a few days ago, I think maybe 3 or 4 days ago, somebody on Reddit made another post, and this time it got a lot of traction because a lot of people, been noticing what Noodlers have been doing, and they've been sliding more and more into like the extremist part of politics, right? So more and more they saw what was happening, and this really became a huge thread with literally more than 1,000 comments. And in it they pointed to Goulet pens, because Goulet pens have been a strong marketer of Noodler's inks.
For sure.
So so people are like, oh, I like shopping at Goulet, but I don't think I can, shop at somewhere where they so like aggressively market Goulet inks. Not Goulet inks, sorry, Noodler's inks. So I think the first mistake that happened was that Rachel Goulet started responding to some of these comments
on Reddit.
Okay, so that's what I would not have done as a retailer, because once you start responding to these comments on a social media kind of space that you don't own, you kind of lose control of the narrative, right? And then she was like, oh, we're sorry, this is not our politics, blah blah blah, we're gonna talk to Nathan about this. And so a lot of people were like, oh, you're only talking about it because it's influencing your bottom line, because the backlash and all this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a mess there. So this particular next piece of information I received from Reddit as well, but apparently Rachel had updated. Apparently Brian Goulet spent like about 3 hours ish on the phone with Nathan Tardif, and trying to convince him that, hey, look, what's happening is wrong. You should change these ink labels. It's anti-Semitic, blah 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 blah. And obviously, Nathan Tardif has been told this before, but coming from Goulet, it really has some kind of gravitas, right? So she comes back and she updates this on Reddit, which I think is, again, I don't think it's the job of Goulet pens to go out and educate Nathan Tardif, but I especially don't think that it's the job of Goulet pens to come back and say, oh, we've spoken to Nathan and he's kind of seen the errors of his way.
Well, the cynical view is that it seems a bit too convenient that Goulet pens suddenly grew a conscience when their bottom line was threatened, right?
So that's exactly what a lot of people were thinking and saying. And I think just that social media strategy there leads to a lot of confusion. It allows people to think whatever they want. And then a few hours later, Noodlers came out with the apology that they did on their Instagram, right? So, I'm not gonna read through the apology, but a few minutes afterwards, Goulet Pens came out with their statement on Instagram about halting Noodler's products. So I think this post is also something that I probably wouldn't have done, because you're really assuming that whoever is reading this post, and they have 133K followers, right? Whoever is reading this post understands the conversation that happened on Reddit, understands the history behind, Noodler's Inc., blah, 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 blah.
Exactly.
The statement is too short and too lacking in nuance and detail.
Yes, exactly.
To make it sound like anything other than, as you said, it feels like, if you don't know anything about this, it feels like, hey, Nathan's apologized. Why are you still kind of, I guess, as you said, pushing him under the bus for this? So I think unless you knew that, Brian Goulet, was talking to him, unless you knew that this push from Nathan Tardif was actually induced in a large part by Goulet Pens, this statement looks weird.
The juxtaposition, right? You have on Goulet Pens, we say been this like racist themes, and we don't want to carry this brand anymore until they change it.
Right.
And then at the same time, like only hours apart, I'm not sure which post came first, but on Noodles they said that we apologize, we're gonna make changes.
Yeah. So the Noodlers post came first on Instagram, but the action that was taken was from Goulet Pens first. Right? So that's the whole confusing part about this. So I, behind the scenes, spoke to the Goulet Pen Company, or at least somebody who works there and is a leader in the company. At least I would consider him a leader in the company, and it was in these meetings. So I've actually, I listen to the Goulet podcast. I respect, I really respect the Goulet Pen Company. I think what they've built is amazing. I think there are, in contemporary times, I think there are two geniuses in the stationery world. One is Brian Goulet, and the other, I don't even know if I can consider them in the stationery world, but the other is Kawai-san from TSL. But I really respect Brian Goulet. I really respect what they've done. And I wanted to get to the bottom of this. And what they told me was that actually a lot of this conversation with Nathan Tardif has been going on for many, many years, right? And there was another problematic manufacturer on Goulet Pens, Herbert Pen Company, and they've actually removed Herbert Pen Company from their store now.
But did they do that in the public way like this?
No, they did not. So this was handled behind closed doors. But for a long time, I wanted to ask, hey, why do you? First of all, are you aware that these makers are very problematic for your brand image? And then second of all, then, why do you keep carrying them?
Those are two very different things. I mean, it's one thing to choose not to carry a brand. There can be tons of reasons for that. But to make a public statement that we are no longer carrying this brand because we think they're racist themes, that's taking a few steps further, right?
Yeah. And then there's also another thing of we didn't know, right? And I think this was the stance that Goulet Pens on Reddit initially took, was, hey, we didn't know, we felt uncomfortable with these images, but we didn't know that it was specifically racist. And, I don't know how fair that is to say I didn't know, but, I asked them and they said apparently this conversation with Nathan Tardif has been going for many, many years. And it's been escalated earlier in the year, around January, I guess because of Volkler Green. But now with the Reddit like blow up, it's irrefutable evidence, right, that this is a huge problem. And I think the financial boycott, right, that's obviously have to have a big impact on a guy like Nathan Tardif, who's all about you know independent like business freedom, blah 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 blah. And so I think I can definitely see why a company and the owners of a company would want to give a long-time business partner the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying that they're necessarily friends, but if you've worked with somebody for 12 years, and let's be honest, right? Like, Noodler's Inc. has played a large part in Goulet-Penn's growth. I think it would have been, wrong to, or I don't know, right and wrong is so subjective here, but I wouldn't have dropped Noodler's Inc. just because a group of individuals, were having problems with their labels. I definitely would want to recognize that these labels are offensive or discriminatory, but having worked with somebody for more than a decade, I definitely understand why Goulet-Penn's wants to hash it out with Noodler's behind the scenes without making a public statement. And the way that they approached it isn't necessarily the way that I would have approached it, right? But I understand why they didn't just take down the brand immediately, because that also sends a different kind of message. I think they're in a really difficult position.
But here's what I don't understand. So Goulet-Penn says they don't know that this was a racist trope. Noodler says in their own post, we did not know that this was a racist trope. Everyone seems to buy Goulet-Penn's they did not know, but no one seems to buy that Noodler's didn't know that this was racist. It seems to be a dual standards here.
Well, if you look at the comments, I think the comments, shine a different story. I don't know if any of the parties know, right? I didn't know it was a racist trope. Did you know it was a racist trope?
Definitely not. And the thing is, I have not even seen the labels yet.
They're just dudes with horns on them.
Yeah.
Like devil horns.
I mean, I don't know much about Noodles at all. I've never been motivated to buy any of the rings. It's never been particularly interesting to me. But based on what little I know, the guy seems to have very strong opinions about monetary policy, fiscal policy, and politics in general. I haven't seen anything in the past that, at least to me, seemed obviously racist. And maybe this is me being naive, but based on that, it seemed like a departure for him to release an ink with an intentionally racist theme.
Right. So I think the baseline here is that there's plausible deniability on both sides, right? It's possible that Nathan Tardif didn't know. It's possible that Goulet-Penn Company didn't know specifically why it was racist. They might have heard rumors saying that, hey, Nathan Tardif's imagery is racist, but they might not have dug in any further than that, right? I think that's possible. For Nathan's part, that possibility was decreased because he is a self-proclaimed history buff, right? Self-proclaimed very passionate about historical events. A lot of his posts reference that, right? So I feel like that's when a lot of people said, hey, you said you are such a history nerd. Like, how did you not know that historically this has been used against the Jewish people?
Fair enough.
So I think that's probably there. Whereas, I don't think Brian Goulet is particularly like a history buff. He might like history, right? But he doesn't go out and research historical events to put on his products.
Yeah.
I think my last word on this is that there is a lot of movement behind the scenes, even if we're not aware of it. I'd personally like to give the Goulet-Penn Company the benefit of the doubt. How did they handle this on social media? Let's just say I wouldn't have handled it the same way. But I think knowing the story from beginning to end, I think they're trying their best. I don't think there's a need to like cancel Goulet pens. And for Noodlers, I think I hope they improve their ink quality. That's all I have to say about that.
So one last thing I want to say is like one of my favorite podcasters is a guy named Scott Galloway. He's a professor of marketing, and he usually talk about tech topics. But one thing he has recently talked about on various podcasts is the importance of guardrails. And what he means by guardrails is having someone very close to you that cares about you, wishes you all the well, but will tell you in those uncertain terms when you screw up and when you are straying off course. And because this person wishes you well, because this person is close to you, you listen to that person, and it prevents you from doing stupid things, basically. So the absence of guardrails, if you don't have guardrails like that, then you may be tempted to think that people who point out like flaws in what you're doing and criticize you are like hostile, and to me,
right, out to get you.
Yeah. So to me, what this all looks like is absence of guardrails.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for Goulet Pen Company. This is, if I were running a pen company, that's not where I would want to be right now. Yeah,
for sure.
All right, let's close it off with some news.
so lighter topics.
So Sailor has, as you know, for the past few years, released these quote-unquote overseas exclusive inks that you can only buy outside of Japan and for some reason in Ancora.
Yes.
And they've recently released a series of pens, inspired by these inks. Have you taken a look at them?
I saw them. I think they talked about it on the Pen Addict podcast recently too.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, the pens look nice. It reminds me a little bit of the most recent, what was it? The Shiori pens. A little bit. Not quite as nice, but still interesting. My question is, I've never been interested in the slim pens because, well, they are too slim, too small, and they almost seem like pocket pens to me. So why I wonder is this a form factor that people want to buy, that is the perfect size for a lot of people, or is it the case that now the large Pro Gear nibs, the large Pro Gears are becoming so pricey that it's almost too expensive for most people? So this will be, Sailor may be focusing more on the slims because they are quote unquote more affordable.
I think that's a really good question, and I had the same question as well. First of all, one of these pens is called Nuts.
That's good.
Yeah, that's nuts to me. But I think there's a factor of both, right? For the long-time Sailor collectors, the slim is probably less appealing because there haven't been as many store exclusives in slim compared to the large, right? I'm not saying that they don't exist. They do exist, and there are many, but I think the large is more appealing for the collectability, and also because nobody else does a 21K nib. So I sell a lot, and a lot of my audience is female, and the slim pens are much harder for me to sell compared to the full-size pens. That being said, I asked some retailers in the US, I said, hey, why do you guys keep releasing in your exclusive colors, right? They release the slim size, the regular size, the KOP size. I'm like, guys, what's going on? And I believe in the US, the slim sizes are easier for retailers to sell because of the lower barrier to entry on price.
But then, so related to that then, so I just, so a few days ago, Sailor's most recent quarterly report came out, and one thing they do point out in this one, unlike the last annual report, is they do finally point out that the raw material costs are going up, including, or they specifically called out gold, and they said that our sales are slightly up, despite gold prices going up. So I'm starting to wonder if the 21K nibs are almost becoming a problem for them if they're pricing themselves out of the market because of that, and maybe they should consider releasing large 14K nibs again. I don't really understand why that's not something they do.
I agree with you. I think that's the ideal for me, is if they introduce the 14K or reintroduce the 14K large nibs and save the 21K nibs for their very exclusive projects.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. There's some pilot news.
Yeah, so we talked a few episodes ago about this neo-classic pens, or some call them all but Madison call them neo-classic for some reason. So it's this year's Custom Club limited edition, and as far as I know, this pen is now sold out pretty much everywhere. It came in translucent blue, green, and brown with, I think, only fine, medium fine, and medium nibs, but they're still very popular. And now, apparently, Pilot is going to restock these pens later this year. But this time, they're going to offer all of the custom heritage nib options. You got your FA nib, your Waverly, your Chords, Music, all of them. But also, as far as I can tell, these you have to pre-order. At first I thought this was just a Pen to Note thing, but Pen to Note was the one that first announced this. Or at least I saw it on Pen to Note first, but now I see it on Nagasawa, Hachimonja, and others. They all say the same thing, that you have to pre-order by May, and they're going to be delivered by November. I think it's something new here going on that I've never seen before.
I hope that the success of these pens show Pilot that there is a desire for more interesting, even if they just redo the same body, right? In fact, redo the same body, right? We don't want to see other bodies. Redo the same body, but with different colors and maybe some glitter in between, just for Mirai Cat.
Yeah, and white socks.
I have it on good authority that there will be another blue retailer exclusive Custom 823 this year.
That would be very interesting. I hope it's not too dark. But just one more thing about this release, and we have said so many times on the podcast that the joke with Pilot is like interesting pen or interesting nib, pick one, right? Here, for the first time in a long time, you have both an interesting pen and you get an interesting nib with it.
I think this is the direction that they need to go, and I hope they're very successful.
Yes.
My only concern is that you already made people buy all of these pens in like FMB or whatever the nib sizes were originally. So how many people are going to be repeat buyers, or how many people are going to be drawn to these pens specifically because they have the new nibs?
Yeah, but I think there weren't that many available. I know that I think Bongbox only got a few, and they sold out very fast. So people who wanted to buy them from outside Japan had to go through like scalpers like JP Selects. So I think this is good news for a lot of people. Yeah,
for sure. All right, and I guess with that, let's close it out. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
We're hoping that we're going to have an interesting interview in the next episode, but we won't say more than that for now.
That's right. And with that, look forward to the next episode because it's going to be lots of fun. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram and TikTok at Tokyo Station Pens, and on Twitter at Tokyo Station MNH.
And my name is Jacob. I'm Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter, and have a blog at foodafan.com.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye.